Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Today we begin and end our journey on a desolate RimWorld as a lone tribesman, with nothing but the skin on our bones and a fistful of edible paste, also a bow, and sharp stone, just in case we need to defend ourselves, of course, against wild critters. Now, this playthrough was modded, and I have turned off any tribal factions to help stack the odds against us. Most factions being pirates or some type of mechanoids. We're also beginning in a mountainous region, which is perfect for defending ourselves. Of course, we waste no time gathering wood for our shelter and defenses, also placing harvest orders on berries, which will no doubt be essential for Glass's survival. I decided to go with wooden fencing for the base for the time being because it costs quite a bit less wood and would save us from gathering more resources than what a normal wooden wall would. All this, of course, at the cost of its health points being extremely low compared to other walls, especially normal wooden walls, by quite a bit. Yes, Glass is meditating, no doubt trying to find solace through meditation given his humble surroundings. No bed, no air conditioning. We're really roughing it. This dense, rigid stone will make for a nice place to lay our head. We will, of course, also need to plant something if we intend to survive in this ruthless valley. I did choose, of course, to sow rice because it grows very quickly, especially when using the tilled soil mod, which we do have installed. Finally, we rest our weary head after a hard day's labor. The next day, the rain still pours, though this doesn't dampen Glass's exhilarating rice sowing, of course. Glass decides shortly after the rain dissipates to harvest some berries. Then he actually decides berries just are not going to cut it anymore. Glass is hungry, and the only thing that will satisfy his growling tummy is to take the lives of innocent animals in the vicinity. The deer finally drops after Glass loosens the final of what was multiple arrows into it. Andy decides to carry it back home and sow some more rice before bedtime. At this point, Glass had been sowing rice for so long, the moon finally crept over the mountains. He decided it was time to butcher that deer from earlier in the day, which after this many hours, no doubt, had to have been smelling quite foul. Nonetheless, Glass decided to viciously devour the smelly deer head, however. And then just before bed, Glass does toss another rice seed in the ground before he lays his weary head to rest for the night. The next morning, after a rejuvenating sleep on the comfortable ground bed, Glass then begins collecting wood for our defensive walls of the base. No doubt our first event should take place shortly. I decided to go with wood fencing for the base walls at first, as well for the exact same reason as the little hut that we made. It's cheap and easy, like all good things in life. I also went with the tried and true method of a one block wide gap filled with traps as our defenses. However, at the time, I didn't know Glass's construction skill was too low to build spike traps, so I had to think of an alternative. Through the night, Glass continues working until we get a visitor. She didn't really have anything worth trading. She did, however, have things worth taking. Do you see where I'm going with this? The small amounts of food that she did drop will actually go a long way, and the musket, though weak and not very accurate, would do us much more good than our short bow that we currently have equipped. And of course, this was around the time I realized when playing that Glass and his Butterfingers couldn't fumble together a simple wooden spike trap. However, our first event happens in the form of a mad squirrel. Glass, with his rifle trembling, takes aim at the rabid rodent and ends its miserable existence. And I bet you thought I wasn't going to do traps since my construction skill is so low. Well, you thought wrong. I decided to build wooden barricades. Not exactly the same as these spike traps, but they do serve the purpose of some type of trap. And on the night of April May 15th, Glass, the barbaric lad he is, decides to shoot another cuddly deer. Though he actually gets bored of the hunt and leaves his prey to bleed out with its open gut shot wounds, as any man of honor would do, of course. Then the next day, as I admire our previous hunt's work, we get our first raid. It's actually a specialist droid from the Separatist Droid Army wielding a pretty sweet sniper rifle. It was also during this battle I regret building from wood fencing since the droid cuts through it like hot ice cream. I decided to have Glass finish up some barricades before the droid gets to us. Then this ended up turning into a game of cat and mouse, and though I wanted to be the cat so desperately, I was more of the lowly rat who shot from around a corner every time it turned its back. Luckily the barricades do some damage and distracted it long enough, I could take a few worthless pot shots. I had also been trying to repair my door when the droid kicked it in, which was the same thing it wanted to do to my front teeth. I decided it would be safer to try and walk over my traps than actually try and fight it hand to hand. Luckily, I had actually gotten a group of visitors who were more than excited to rupture this droid circuit board for me since I was a weakling in a textile dress, and especially since the specialist droid decided to attack me, outnumbered 10 to 1. And lucky for me, because I can now snake in and nab that sweet, sweet rifle from its cold dead claws. The next day, I actually decided to use a little bit more wooden fencing and also expand our defenses a little bit longer than they previously had been. Now, having plenty of pelt, I started working on hide walls for a tent as well, which I assumed would be cozier than our current living arrangements. Then I actually decided maybe we do need more hide for the tent, among other things. Plus, I wanted to try out my new rifle. So, I decided to tremble behind my barricades and pick off a warg from a distance. I decided while Glass slept, I'd plan out more growing area around our tent, some of which we would actually use for cotton. I plan to grow the cotton and make a sleeping bag along with a winter cloak for the impending winter ahead. During the middle of another exhilarating sewing session, we actually get another raid from the Separatist droid army. It appears to be just one droid again. It looks like this time he is equipped with an E5 blaster rifle. This droid also went for the door, but didn't actually bother destroying it, instead coming straight into our barricade shortly thereafter. Now that we actually have a full line of barricades, it's much easier to shoot at the droid as it's trying to escape us and get to cover so I can return fire. Glass ended up shooting at the droid for hours before he finally delivers a crippling blow to it. By the 8th of August, a dry storm caused a fire to break out right outside our base. To this I responded by lining the base with steel walls, which steel in RimWorld also burns, but I believed it was much less flammable than the dry kindling that I had originally built with. Then shortly after that point, the fire had moved on past my base, as you can see by the scorched earth outside my doors. And late into the night of August 9th, we had a pirate raider. He was hardly worth mentioning. He immediately hit our spike trap and fled in terror. He does attempt to burn our steel walls, however, though by this point Glass was not impressed. He had black lungs from the soot in the air from the fire. The rapscallion then drops on a barricade before he even caught a glance of Glass. We ended up getting the event of a colonist joining, which I assume is just the game trying to help us grow our population since it's just Glass currently. I decided before this I was only going to use Glass since he is a lone quote unquote tribesman. So I had our new buddy come into the base, drop all his goodies before I banished him. Finally, we see our first harvest of cotton coming in, but since our banished friend left us his nice parka, there was really no need for a winter cloak, given the parka and the winter cloak do the exact same thing. We do, however, end up making a bedroll, so now Glass can sleep on a thin cotton sheet that's draped over his dirt and stones. Ah, cozy cotton sheets. From this point, I decided we should spruce up the place some if we are going to try and actually thrive in this area. I found some neat shrines made of wax, no doubt dedicated to an indigenous people's gods, so of course I decided to tear them down and build my dining room out of them. I built a fire pit and queued up some weak stews for Glass to cook throughout the day so we could make the best use of our raw rice that we've been growing. That same day, a group of androids stopped in to trade. I sold them a few of the weapons we had. That way we could get a start on gathering up silver for future trades. I went back to mining shortly after, and right before the traders left, they actually left us with 12 forum, which wasn't enough for anything useful, but I assumed it would be good for selling to maybe another merchant. Then, of course, I just began using more wax to finish squaring off our dining room from the storage room. And on the 7th of September, we had an ugly gentleman fall from the sky. I ordered Glass to strip him naked so we could leave him to the elements as God intended. Early the next morning, a couple of crazed chinchilla made the regrettable decision of challenging Glass to a shootout. In what was surely a fair fight between the animals and Glass, we ended up outgunning them. And by this I mean one was killed by a trap and the other shot directly through the heart by our giant laser rifle. For the next few days, we just cleaned up around the base and also laid a flooring for a dining room. It's also worth mentioning before, or basically just around this time, I found Cassandra Classic to be too slow and boring, so I changed storytellers to Randy. Uh, this was a decision, of course, later I came to regret. We were playing on Blood and Dust the entire time, I believe. On the early morning of September 13th, the buffalo lost its mind deep in the forest. It decided it was going to totally mess up Glass for the atrocious base he set up in the middle of its home. Once Glass woke up, I stepped near the barricades to see the beast marching around like it owned the place. Glass didn't take too kindly to this, and he decided he'd dispose of it humanely. Glass then decided to cut the buffalo's head into small bits and pieces, severing its head to be used in a delectable stew later that night. Finally, Glass gets to lay his weary head to rest as the first snow falls on this land for the year. The comfort does get cut short due to another separatist droid raider who just so happens to be double fisting laser blasters, though. As the droid went to attack us, we ended up having a turkey absolutely freak out, deciding it wanted humanoid flesh, thus trapping the droid in the barricades as Glass fired at both of them. The droid finally remembered it's a literal killing machine all of a sudden and splattering the turkey's brains onto the ground just before frying Glass's right leg before he could actually get away. Glass, of course, has the high ground though, so he shoots the droid in the back, frying its circuit board. A few days later, on the 2nd of December, a tragedy strikes in the form of malaria. I was very much hoping we wouldn't actually get sick, since our plant skill was too low to actually grow herbal meds, and that fire that happened on the map wiped out about 99% of them off of the map. Also, something worth mentioning at this point, we had actually had a Boomalo self-tame at some point, but of course our animal skill is so low, we couldn't tame it or, do anything with it, so I just left it to starve in an area. Since we have an extremely low medical skill and literally no medicine at all, I decided to accept a quest that would actually allow someone to stay with us for a limited time, giving me temporary control over them. I'd hope that they would either bring medicine or at least have a high medical skill. After having Kenneth arrive, I forced him to brave the elements in search of the only two heal root plants we had on the map. All this in hopes that Kenneth's decent medical skill and a few scraps of fuel root would save Glass's life. Kenneth fought, as did Glass, but the malaria was very persistent. On the 3rd of December, Glass got word from a local faction who offered a reward in turn for a favor. The reward being 3 Glitter World medicine. This could be just what Glass and I need to get him past his illness. However, the favor was to murder Kenneth. That's right, Kenneth, the kind gentleman who has been taking care of Glass. Glass, knowing though this was his last sliver of possible survival, shoots Kenneth in his sleep. That's right, I did it. I killed Kenneth, and we got our medicine. But at what cost? After being sick for a few days and cooped up in his tent, the intense pain drove Glass into a blind rage that he decided to take out in the only way he knows, by attacking the local population of horse, naturally. The horse beat the sickly Glass to a pulp, leaving him crippled in the frozen soil. And so that was the end of Glass, and the end of this video, of course, and the end of this story with Glass, although it is a story nonetheless. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video and watching this far. Thank you for just watching in general and clicking on it. It's the first real video I've made like this. I normally do like a Let's Play style, of course, but yeah, thank you guys so much for just sticking around and even just clicking on the video and deciding to watch it, so I really appreciate it. Thank you guys.